Well, good morning, everyone. This is the September 23rd meeting of the Land Use Development Team Oversight Subcommittee. And before we start, can I get a roll call, please, Ms. Cookingham?
Yes, thank you. Chair Friedman?
Here.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez? If you are there, I've sent you a webcam request. And Councilmember Jordan?
Here.
Okay, I will let you know when she's back on. Thank you.
Okay, and if we have difficulties as we get to discussion, please let us know, because I want to make sure that I see her on there, but I want to make sure that she's able to fully participate before we get into any discussion. So please let me know that that technical issue's been taken care of. But for matters now, we can go on. We've done the roll call. Are there any, move on to any preliminary matters, any announcements? And then hearing none, we have the agenda review, so there's no changes to the agenda today. And then I have the approval of the minutes from August 26th, or I'm sorry, August 25th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
I will second those. And do we know if there's Councilmember Gutierrez? Great. So can we have a roll call vote on the minutes, please?
Yes, I can do roll calls. So Councilmember Jordan?
Aye.
Councilmember Gutierrez?
Here.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is for the approval of the minutes from, could you tell me, was it August?
August 25th.
August 25th. Okay, and then Chair Friedman?
Aye. The minutes are approved. And next we are on to public comment, and this is public comment for any items not on the agenda today that are under our purview. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to items not on the agenda?
Thank you, Chair Friedman. So if you wish to comment on items not general public comment, not on the agenda, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. And that indicates to me that you wish to speak. Each person will have 2 minutes to speak. And Chair Friedman, I do not see anyone who has raised their hand at this time. So please, back to you.
Okay, so I will close public comment and we will move on to the agenda items. And agenda item A is an update on the process improvements. And I will turn that over to Ms. Bjork.
Good morning, committee members. I'm Rebecca Bjork. I'm the interim community development director, and we have a presentation for you today that will be presented by myself, Mr. Dayton, Rob Dayton, and Renee Brooke, and Andrew Steffler. So next slide, please. Our meeting, we will be looking at the committee purpose and scope. We will be updating you on those items that we had identified as just do it's. We will give you an update on how we are progressing on our high priority recommendations. We will be talking about other process improvements that may be underway, and then we'll be asking you for any issues or items you'd like us to return with at our next meeting. Next slide, please. So just for review for those who may not have been at the last meeting, the purpose of and scope of this committee is to advise the land development team staff and oversee implementation of process improvements and related issues recommended by the Novak Consulting Group. Next slide, please. The committee scope is to review and provide input on the land development team procedural changes, to review and provide input on potential amendments to the municipal code, board and commission guidelines, and if necessary, if the city charter. Next slide, please. And other functions are to receive reports of our just do it items and give us any feedback you might have about how those have progressed, and then provide other input to the land development team, management team on issues related to land development. Next slide, please. And again, for those who may be watching, the land development team is an interdepartmental team made up of staff from community development, public works, the fire department, the parks and recreation department, and the sustainability and resilience department. Each of these departments has a piece of our land development team efforts to improve our community, to manage development within our community. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to start with the things that we identified as just do it's and give a report on where we are with those. And for the first of these, I'm going to ask Mr. Dayton to present the work that we've done to move towards developing a vision for the land development team. Rod, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bjork. So committee members, it was my great pleasure to have to work with the land development team in getting to what Novak defines as establish a clear vision that all members of the team commit to and adopt. So that is the recommendation one. And what we have on the screen is just give you a little idea of how we approach this. At the bottom of the pyramid, pretty much everybody knows what they do. The challenge is why do we do it? So we're trying to connect the employees and our staff with the mission, why they come to work and why that's important, and empower them to fulfill that mission, and then also come up with a vision of where we want to be. Where do we want to be in 5 years? And so cultivating that culture is really what this is about. Developing a culture where people understand the big picture, and then in their performance in the tasks are able to get there. So how did we do that, and how we've begun to do that? Next slide. So we're looking at first at that mission, or we call it actually a why statement. Why do we exist? What we did is we initially got together managers and supervisors to understand how we would do that process, and then we invited representatives from across the land development team to engage in a 4-hour workshop for the why statement, and that happened on September 8th. And then we didn't quite get to the finish line. We were almost there, and we spent another hour this week getting to more of an official why statement. Next slide. Let me just tell you a little bit about the why statement. This actually comes from Simon Sinek, who is in one of the top 5 TED Talks on the internet. Everybody understands what they do in every organization. You know, what we do in land development is we're trying to prove applications. That's, you know, that is not an issue. Most organizations identify what they do. Fewer organizations can identify the members themselves, can identify how they do it. These are the things that make them special or set them apart from other organizations. But very few government organizations, private organizations, and even individuals know why they do it, why they do what they do. Why is not the end result for making money or producing applications approval. Why is a purpose, it's a cause, it's a belief. And it's the very reason that the land development team exists. So we really wanted to get to that why. Another important thing about why is it is all limbic brain. And so the neocortex emotional aspect of what we do is captured in the why statement. So it also empowers employees to feel good about their jobs. And then another goal would be that our community feels good about the land development team. So it works in both directions. Next slide. So in doing that, this is the finished product. It's supposed to be a very, very simple statement of contribution and outcome. And this is what the team came up with: helping you enhance our city and build a better community. Helping you enhance our city and build a better community. It's intentionally short. It is to be memorized. It's one thing to come up with a why statement. It's another thing to indoctrinate it and get it into the stream of thinking. So shortness is important. And I want to walk you through a little bit about how this came about. This this comes first of all from us asking the employees, the team members, tell us a story about when you felt the most pride to work for this organization. And let me tell you, there were some very good stories that came out of that, and those stories become the ingredients for the contributions, the kind of contributions that we're proud of, and the kind of outcomes that we're proud of as an organization. And then that becomes the basis of, if you just go back a slide to get to this statement, helping you enhance our city. So helping you is our contribution. And then the outcome, enhance our city and build a better community, is where we really felt the most power from the employees about where they feel the most pride in this organization. Just to give you a little example, next slide, about what employees are saying about this statement. They're saying, as we went through this process, these are direct quotes from people in the organization without naming names. As we went through the process, it was the discussion that made us all stop and think about what exactly we are here for as members of the land development team. Next slide. Another person said, I feel that the wording emphasizes our collaboration with the community and draws a stronger connection between us and the members of the community, rather than putting us at odds against each other. Next slide. Another person said, it reflects our role to help enhance and build environment and ensure that the public knows how and is empowered to participate in the conversation surrounding land development. Another person said, I think it's important to remind people that we're part of this community too. We aren't blind bureaucrats. We genuinely want to help. And then another person said, I love the play of city and community because the what and why of our work involves both of these, from the smallest to the largest projects. And then I think finally, I really like the why statement. It resonates with me because restoring historic buildings really enhances the city and builds community. It really gives the community a sense of pride in this place. It allows all of us to know this place matters. So moving on to the next slide, you can see that this statement really caused an emotional, a prideful response to getting the employees focused on why we're at work and why what we do matters, helping you enhance our city and build a better community. This particular statement is also intended to resonate with the community we serve and the applicants we serve. So if this was a banner, so to speak, on letterhead or on applicant letters or as a part of presentations, you can see how this begins to guide and remind us of why we're at the table in the first place, and to refocus the outcomes of each engagement, to the smallest to the largest, on how they can be more effectively done, helping you enhance our city and build a better community. The next step will be vision. So looking at the next slide, we want to come up with a vision statement. What are we doing to come up with a vision statement? A vision statement is where we want to be in 5 years. What will they say about us? What will the council say about us? What will the community say about us in 5 years? This builds upon the why statement, our mission, and it's so what we did is we surveyed all the land development team members and we gave them aspirational statements. So where did we get those statements? Well, there was about 12 things that Novak said that we needed to improve. Improve this, improve that. We turned each of those improvement recommendations into aspirational statements as though they were already true. And then we put out a survey, and of these 12, we asked everybody, which are the top 3 aspirational statements that you would feel strongest about if the community and the council and our stakeholders said that about the team, that would really be important to you. And so let me show you on the next slide the 3 statements that really brought the most power. So next slide. The first one, the land development team guides applicants through the process and works with applicants to resolve issues and develop solutions. That was by far the #1 answer selected. That was in the 64% range. So 64% of all the land development team members put that one in their top 3. The next one at around 40%, the land development process balances the interests of applicants, project applicants, and the community as a whole. And then at about 35%, the land development process is easy to understand and navigate. These three statements, aspirational statements, which again came from the recommendations from the Novak report, are the ones that the land development team employees specifically feel most excited about the community, the council, the stakeholders saying about them after 5 years. So the next step will be to craft these key things, these ones that got the most power, the most juice, into a visionary statement that will describe the land development team and where we want to be in 5 years. So that's as far as we've gotten. There's still probably some work to do on values, but I want to pause right here and allow the committee to comment on the work so far and give us your feedback.
Great, thank you, Mr. Dayton. That was great. I will open the floor. Councilmember Jordan, you have the floor.
Good morning, Rob. So I guess I'll ask kind of an uncomfortable question. So the story of my life, right? So the dynamic that existed before we started this already allowed high performance people to do some of this stuff just because they naturally gravitated to that. So this is going to then kind of grab everybody, take them. I like the process, get them to acknowledge stuff. But when you start talking about, you know, a mission, particularly the first bullet, the resolve issues and develop solutions, which would probably, well, that's why it was like #1 with Novak. That would probably be the #1 complaint. How does this process translate into the employee review, employee requirements, legal field, the HR kind of field? How will this not just empower or motivate the better performers, but how will it also begin to give us tools to either work more with the underperformers or move on?
So excellent question. So Chair Friedman and Councilmember Jordan, if we could go to slide 12. So you start at the top with the high level 50,000 foot view of the organization. And that is, unfortunately in America, the missing piece for most organizations. They just don't talk about it. They're the most power. And again, in the limbic brain, the emotional part of the brain, the neocortex says that this is why I get out of bed in the morning. This is why I'm working. It's actually, money is not a satisfactory enough compensation for what we do. It has to be empowering. So starting at this place, it does give us a lot of juice. It coordinates us heading in one direction. Then we haven't talked about values, but what's important to us to get to our vision, where we want to be in 5 years. So specific to your question, how does that affect the individual performance? Well, it just keeps going down. So then you have a strategy that becomes a little bit more granular and tactical about how a specific group would fulfill that mission to help people enhance our city and build a better community. I mean, it's already rolling off my tongue. It's like, this is where we're going. This is where we want to be. And then you have to have a scorecard that says exactly, did we move the needle? Did we actually get better? And then we have implementation plans that get even more granular down to the employee specific performance, which is their personal plan on how they need to come on board. Now, all that said, and this is again the next most difficult thing, and you know, we've done this in public works now. I think we're on our 9th year of this, and it's had tremendous impact in how public works performs. But it takes work. It takes management and supervisor leadership to continually push down the why statement, have it always in front of us, and a part of a lot of different conversations on how we are doing this, and then how you, individual are seeing this through. It becomes an accountability piece, even in an evaluation, because we're always we even reference it when we celebrate employees in public works. We're even referencing, did they fulfill them? How did what they do that we're celebrating fulfill our vision and our why statement? I hope that helps.
Yeah, so I guess you would tell me, so I work for a pretty big company, you would tell me it's really easy to start at the top of the pyramid and blah, blah, blah. But as you continue to go down, and I guess the chunks get bigger in this example, it's easy to lose sight and not assign the resources or what you need to do to make it all the way to the bottom and successful, right? So there's a tendency to just say, hey, yeah, look, we got a new mission thing. Hey, here's our values. Okay, have a good day, right? But there's a growing and continual escalation of work as you continue down to the bottom of this pyramid, and we have to make the commitment to do that, right?
That's correct, and Ms. Bjork knows very, very much about how we've done that, and she could speak to that.
Certainly, but what I wanted to say too is one of the things I like about the mission statement as it is currently is the helping you is very general. So the helping you is helping applicants, it's helping neighbors, it's helping businesses, and it's helping other members of the land development team. So it's really working all very jointly and pulling together. And one of the comments and concerns of the Novak study was cross-training and making sure people understood each other's work. And so the helping you part of that is that we are supporting each other, we are supporting the community, we're supporting the applicants to do this work jointly.
Okay, and so one of my roles, our roles, is to make sure we understand that elevator down to the bottom of the pyramid, and we continue to provide resources to get there and support to get there, right? And so I see you nodding, and so I would just ask you to keep remembering to remind us of that. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan, or Councilmember Jordan. Councilmember Gutierrez, I saw you pop up. Do you have any questions or comments at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Chair Friedman. Mr. Dayton, thank you for this presentation. I am not sure if you answered this question, but I know Mike Jordan was asking it in a way, but can you just give me a simple one sentence, like how do you plan to implement this? And I know Ms. Bjork talked about within staff learning what each other, each department's doing, what are the different tasks, but can you just give me a little simple, like this is how we're going to do it. We're going to talk about it every day at our, staff meeting, just for the general public to kind of understand in a very simple form.
Rebecca, did you want to answer that, or do you want me to do?
You can go ahead and then I can add in.
Okay, so yeah, I'm sorry, I can't do it in one sentence, but you have to keep it, in front of us. It's really hard at first. I can tell you by experience in public works. First, it was on the wall. We just put it everywhere. Then we started talking about it in work groups. You start to talk about it individual projects, individual applications. When you get in a log jam and there's a conflict, it's a really great reminder of why we're in the room and what is the goal we're trying to achieve. And it's a North Star, if you will, to continually look to guide to. And then it can, if we do keep it top of mind, and as leaders, as supervisors and managers continually reminding ourselves about it, it also trickles down into the evaluation. I've seen it in many evaluations in public works where we're calling attention to, and you don't see the vision yet, but where we want to be and how that individual's performance is or is not achieving that. So it does get as granular as the individual.
Thank you. You answered my second question. I was going to suggest, is there any way that we can put it in the staff evaluation? So you answered it. Thank you.
And I would just add that the values are an important part of this as well. And that when there is a conflict, because there are different challenges and different interests in land development, going back to the touchstone of the values that we all believe helps us to get to a point where we can get to an acceptable solution for all that meets the interest of the community and the mission statement.
And
Thank you.
just to jump on piggyback on what Ms. Bjork said, is just to give you a preview. Values become the behaviors that we feel are really important to get to our vision. So there might be lots of values that we have right now, but there are certain values that are going to be really key. Certain behaviors are going to be really instrumental in getting us to our vision, where we want to be in 5 years. So we can have the staff highlight those that they think. Again, it's really important that the employees design this because they ultimately are the owners of those values and behaviors. And then when they're the designers of it, then it's much easier as leaders to hold each other accountable to those behaviors and values.
Thank you. I totally agree. So when will we have our vision statement? So out of those three, when will you guys have that one vision statement?
Well, I was very hopeful we'd have it for this meeting, but as you can see, in order to have it be meaningful, it's really important to have the buy-in of the people who need to live it. And so I'm still hopeful we'll have it by next meeting, but I don't want to rush it just to get to a statement. I want it to be a vision statement that we can really truly aspire to as a team across all of the land development team. So we will continue to work on this. Staff are very engaged and enjoying it. I sat in on part of it. It's very hard for me to keep my mouth shut and just listen. So I did try, and I was relatively good at that, but it's really great to see the engagement of people. And we have, as Mr. Dayton said, we had representatives. We would have liked to have the whole team. It's just too difficult to manage a group that size, but we had representatives from all of the areas of the land development team.
Thank you. That's all.
Great. Well, thank you all. This was a very good discussion, and I think it got to the questions and the answers of why starting here with the mission and ultimately the vision is important. Because if we read back into the NOVAC report itself, one of the issues is a culture change, and to be able to change the culture, you have to have buy-in to what, the why, and where you want to be. So I think this is a very positive first step. And I too, Ms. Bjork, like the helping you, because from my notes and reading the NOVAC report, the number one thing starts with the vision, and then it comes down into customer service and good outcomes. And that kind of follows the pyramid that you showed, Mr. Dayton. So as we're transitioning to customer service, the first thing is helping you. And then I also like the word build in there, because we are literally building in many cases here. But we're also building a community with our historic resources and other things that we're trying to balance. So I look forward to what the vision is going to be, and I like this first step, and ultimately it will trickle down because everybody will be on the same page, especially if they have the buy-in. So I appreciate all your work on this particular mission statement. And so moving on, you continue, Mr. Dayton, or would it be Ms. Bjork?
It's me.
Give you the floor.
And we'll move to the next slide. So the next Just Do It that we had identified was to establish and enforce land development team meeting attendance expectation. And obviously, this is a fairly easy one. It's a top-down request of staff and then a top-down follow-through with staff. And so I have sent communication to my colleagues in the other departments and to the managers in the land development team, setting this expectation and making sure that staff understand that not only is there an expectation that they be at these meetings, but that if they cannot be at those meetings, that they will need to have somebody who can speak knowledgeably so that we can use the team staff's time and the applicant's time efficiently as we go forward. As we go forward, we do believe there'll be times when we don't need the entire team at all of the meetings, and we will be able to move forward and identify where those things are and where they aren't. But at the outset, we think it's important to have everyone there because sometimes issues come up that were not anticipated and do need the input of a team member who may or may not have been present if we are not requiring everyone to be there. So I feel this one is in play. It's not one that will ever be done. It's one that we will need to continue to implement and have conversations about if we find that we are not having the attendance we need, but we have set the expectation at this time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. We'll go to the next slide. I'm going to ask Ms. Brooke to present on the next item.
Thank you, Ms. Bjork. So this next Just Do It is a partial Just Do It. So what's up here on the slide is something that we can do pretty quickly. The full recommendation from NOVAC would require an ordinance amendment to modify our pre-application review team procedures, and in the code it requires a pre-application review, a very formal pre-application review process for about 10 different application types. So to fully implement the whole recommendation, it's a longer term effort. But what we can do in the meantime, and what was recommended by NOVAC, is to have a more informal process with applicants. So currently the formal pre-application review team process requires applicants to submit plans, whatever materials they have developed at a pretty early stage for the project. But for some, that can be pretty intensive preparation to even submit that to staff, because what you submit to staff dictates the level of detail that we can provide comments for. So in some cases, pre-application submittals have become fairly robust. Applicants have expressed a desire to have a more informal, maybe a couple land development team members come together at set times, and we just might talk to the applicant for an hour and really try to just identify major issues in that set appointment time, rather than have them submit plans that go through a 30-day review process and then a formal written letter comes out of that. That still might be desirable for some applicants in instances of really complex projects where they want that formal communication from staff. But in the meantime, we're open to looking at trying it out, where we set up some time with applicants and just have a conversation with them. And this does occur with individual divisions and departments within the land development team right now. We call them pre-application review or consultations. But to have a couple of more staff members together in the room, we can make sure we're bouncing the right ideas off of each other. We're not giving conflicting advice. So that part of recommendation 17, we can work on much more quickly while we wait for other ordinance amendments to make their way through the process. Then we could take on the full recommendation. And then, yes.
Oh, I was going to say, I'll have you finish, and then we can ask questions for all of these.
Sounds great. Thanks. And I believe Mr. Stuffler was going to address this slide.
Thank you, Renee. Mr. Chair and committee members, I'm Andrew Stuffler, the building official for the city. In this Just Do It, we have been doing this very thing. It's just been problematic when we have a lot of staff turnover. So we've had a lot of inspection staff turnover. I'm thinking there's been 4 or 5 positions that have retired or been promoted. So when you only have a staff of 5 or 6 people, that's almost a complete turnover, and that's pretty disruptive to the construction community when their inspectors changing with each inspection. So we have inspection areas that we've established, and we updated those in, I want to say, May or June. But we try to not change those inspector assignment areas more than once a year, and ideally we keep them for more than a year. So that's the rule. The rule is you should get the same inspector every time on your job site because they're assigned to a geographical area. There are exceptions though, right? So we have people go on vacation, we have people that get sick, we have to keep up with our training in accordance with state law to maintain our certifications. So there are going to be times where the area inspector is not available, and we don't want to delay that inspection request. We want to fill it and keep that project running. So we will have someone fill in. So it's important for us to know that our rule is that the inspector, you will have the same inspector as a rule every time you call at that same address, that same parcel. and as long as we don't change those inspection areas. And that there may be an instance where your inspector is ill, on vacation, attending training, and someone will fill in so that we can provide that service and keep your project going. We also wanted to let you know that we really appreciate you allocating us one additional inspector position. In April and May, we had anticipated very high inspection volumes as we had seen in the prior 6 months. But that is tapered off. So we do have a vacancy and we are holding it, even though you allocated us one additional building inspector position. And we're going to hold that kind of in our hip pocket and watch the inspection activity. It has tapered off and fairly significantly, 20% or more in these first couple months of the fiscal year. So we'll watch that and we'll fill that if we need to in order to maintain consistency of inspectors in the inspection areas. But right now we're doing pretty well. Our inspectors are each getting 8 to 10 inspections a day per inspector, and they're completing those. 12 is our cap. I do have to kind of put a little asterisk by this. Every inspection can be so different, right? So going to look at a water heater replacement is a pretty simple inspection in a single family home. Doing a final inspection of a multifamily property is a big inspection. So to just try to group these into or count these numbers of inspections and say, 8 to 10 or 12 is the max, it really depends on the types of inspections that we get. But as a rule, 8 to 10 inspections a day for each inspector. And then on those days where they have maybe 8 or fewer, or they have extra time, we have them work on lower priority non-immediate priority tasks, important things like expired building permits. We're starting that program back up now that we have some capacity for that, or training, or discussions on common code items that they're code compliance issues they see in the field, so that the inspectors have continuity. They're making the same code calls in their building inspections in different areas of the city, so the contractors aren't confused. And with that, I think we turn this back over to Ms. Bjork.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, next slide. You already got there. Thank you. So the next recommendation was to establish a land development team staff committee to discuss and resolve cross-departmental issues. We do have a standing committee, and so we are revamping that, making it more making sure that those meetings do occur, and importantly, making sure that people attend from the different groups so that we can have the coordination across departmental and across work groups. And if the standing committee members are not available, that they send somebody in their place so that their group is recommended. So that's another one that we are moving forward with. It's one that has been in place, but we're giving it more attention and a stronger commitment to being there. So with that, next slide. If there are any questions on the Just Do It items that we are in process on, and that these are continuing items, they're not going to go away. They will continue to be issues that we need to pay attention to, but we believe they're well underway at this point.
Councilmember Jordan, I see you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Bjork, so if you or Mr. Steffler just wants to chat a little bit more or tell me to chat with you later about inspections. So I know, like, if you had to talk about two things, it was processing and inspections that everybody just isn't happy with or wasn't happy with. And so I'm assuming we were monitoring pre-Novak and now we're monitoring post-Novak. And so I'm my radar's up a little bit on what does that mean that we're doing better monitoring post-Novak that we weren't doing pre-Novak. And then part of Novak, is sitting here trying to look at your nice little colored chart you sent me yesterday, and then at the same time paw through the Novak report and listen at the same time. But one of the mentions there too is performance standards. And so not just are we getting inspectors out and do we have enough inspectors, but what the performance of those inspectors actually is. So is there more to talk about this now, or is that just ongoing and I should just make myself a little sticky note to ask more annoying questions in that kind of category and get down in the weeds a little more? I mean, it's important to me not to just gloss over this kind of stuff with monitoring, and to really show that we're doing something different. We're responding to Novak, and we're doing something in a positive, results-oriented way, rather than just I don't know. You go back to Rob's thing, that just stopping at the tip of the pyramid and not going all the way down and spending the time and making change. So, could one of you just help me with this particular subject of inspections?
Sure, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Jordan. I think what drove a lot of this concern was we had vacancies, and we were filling those vacancies with contract inspectors for about a year, and it might have even been 18 months. But it was we had up to 4 contract inspectors in our office in 18 months. When you have that much change in staffing, you don't know who's coming out to your job site, and it is very, very disruptive. We have, as of, I believe it was, I can't remember the date, but earlier this year, we have all permanent inspectors. So we are using no contract service. That really calms the water for the contractors. Now they can get used to who's coming out, what area, who covers that area, what do they look for. And with the reduction in inspections, the inspectors have more time to talk about the calls they're making out in the field and why they make them. That helps us have internal discussions, and we want to promote that. We want consistency from inspector to inspector. But those are, I think, the really disruptive element for our contractors was having 3 or 4 different contract inspectors dropping in on their job site.
In the best of circumstances, that probably that position and relationship out in the field is a wary one, right? I mean, it's just whatever. There's a tension. There's a needed tension there, of course. And are we doing enough internally, or is there a track there that looks attractive to people that already work here to take the next step to become an inspector from someplace that's a lower scale thing? So are we fostering the bullpen, so to speak, so that we're constantly ready to keep that with our people rather than have to go back out and get contract employees?
Yes, we are. In fact, our most recent building inspector was a promotion from one of our permit technician positions. That said, that's a great concept to hold, but when we do that, we're short a permit technician until we do the recruitment. So It's kind of like the peas under the shell, right? You try to get all the peas under the shell that has the most demand, and we do that as best we can, but there are limitations as well.
Yeah, and then it's complicated still by development activity going up and down in a curve too, and then budget. I get all that. That's why you get paid the big bucks to worry about it, and not me. But all right, thank you.
Chair Friedman and Council Member Jordan, Community Member Jordan, I also wanted to mention that one thing that we did last week and that we may consider doing on a more common basis is an informal survey of just calling people who'd had inspections to see how it went. Got a very, very good response to that. And that's reassuring that the people receiving the inspections, because as you said, there is a certain tension there. We're pleased with how the inspections went.
That's such a good idea. And I know everybody on both sides of the counter has talked about that before, but there's always a worry that where you are in the development process and how your opinion then affects the rest of your development process, and so I can't commend you enough for doing that, and I think we should do more of that at every route, whether it's an encounter at the counter, whether it's when you're going through a design board, wherever it is, and we should be able to offer that service or that option without worry of something happening after that to taint it. So I think those opinions are probably the most valuable of the process. Thank you.
Before we go on to Councilmember Gutierrez, just a slight housekeeping for my colleagues. Just if we could practice what we do at the full council and refer to staff by their last names, so we can practice here. We'll be better at council, because I know that comes up as council. So before I make comments, I see Councilmember Gutierrez. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Friedman. I have a question, and I really appreciate staff and their presentation and their plan for the future. My question is, when a client has a bad experience with an inspector, what is the process to make a formal complaint?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gutierrez, people who have a bad experience with any of our staff should call our office to talk to their supervisor. They can contact me directly if they'd like, and I'll forward them to the supervisor to have the supervisor take a look at the situation, interview them, interview the staff. We want good experiences. I can tell you this. I've been in this line of work for 30 years, 18 years of it as a building official. I have zero tolerance for retaliation. If I even get the sense that staff is retaliating because someone complained, I will counsel that staff member. That is, in fact, I tell them just the opposite. Not the opposite, but I set the expectation this way. We've had a complaint about your service that you've provided. That may be fair, it may not be. I was not out there on site with you. I do not know what happened. My expectation is you will do everything in your power to serve that customer as best possible and leave with them a good taste in their mouth. There are some people who will not be happy with our service no matter how we deliver it, but we will never be the cause of that. And that is the expectation. And I have to tell you, I think there's been in 18 years, 1 or 2 times where an inspector kind of bowed their neck and told me they thought that was a bunch of hooey and I didn't support them enough. The other dozens of times this has happened in my career, they appreciate the support and they do a great job. They do go back and they'll even tell the customer who complained, I want to satisfy you. Please don't take my corrections as anything other than helpful advice on how to comply with the code.
If the client still feels, fear that there might be retaliation, is there any way that a client can make a complaint anonymously, or, is there something they can fill out online and then there's a follow-up? I just want to make sure that people don't feel intimidated because the process is long. By the time they're getting an inspector, they went through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So my concern is I just want people to feel comfortable enough to speak up. And, of course, not all complaints are going to be valid, but I want to be able to start bridging that trust between the community. So something that you guys can keep in mind where they can just fill out a, simple form online. I don't know how that's going to work because, again, when we're trying to lay down rules or, regulations, we're not going to make everybody happy, which I understand, but I also want to keep that in mind.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gutierrez. If you could forward to I think it's slide 28. I just had a quick follow-up question. Yes, so the committee to resolve cross-departmental issues, I appreciate this communication because I think that gets to some of the issues that were highlighted in the Novak report is the different departments kind of sometimes act in silos or might be saying one thing and another department says another thing. It's contradictory, so I like that. Is this they mentioned the counter committee that used to be in place, or is this different than the counter committee? If you could explain what the counter committee is for the public as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Ms. Burke to come on and explain the counter committee. This is generally a supervisory or a management level committee to address issues at that level so that they can then go back and work jointly with their teams at the staff committee level. And Ms. Burke?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Bjork and Committee Member Friedman. The counter committee, which you've heard referenced, hasn't met for a while, but it did for many years, and it was composed of staff who actually staff our public counters. So building and safety, planning, and public works, and some record staff as well. So all the staff you would see if you walked in the lobby at 630 Garden Street would meet monthly and talk about procedural issues or changes and keep people informed. There was even some cross training and job shadowing that occurred. Unfortunately, as we got more busy and we needed to carve out time for other priorities, attendance at the meeting started to fall off, and so they weren't as effective when we didn't have everybody in the room, and eventually it disbanded. And it's unfortunate. I think a committee like that is really important. It's sort of come back together, interestingly enough, during this remote working environment, because as we've transitioned to electronic plan submittal and plan review and talking about reopening our building at some point incrementally, the group has somewhat come back together. And so we might be able to get that team back together again and ongoing, and understand that all of these conversations that we're having about the land development team is causing it will need us to recommit to the land development team and know that that's a high priority, because as we have competing priorities for our time, if it's known by everybody that that is one of your highest priorities, then you will need to make an hour a month available for this type of communication. And so that would be, again, it comes to expectations.
Thank you for clarifying the difference between the staff department cross that we have at the supervisorial level and the counter team. What I'd like to see with the counter committee is I would like to explore that, but within the context of everything we're doing, because from my understanding of it, and even more based on what you said, it seems there is a good utility and a good value from having it. But I understand that the time constraints that we have on staff. And so when you pull from one area, you're taking from another in terms of time. So as we're looking at these just do it's and time staff, I'd like to have an evaluation of whether or not that might be there might be a way to implement it again or reinstitute it, or in another means like you're saying, and modify it. But I think that just if we could get that consideration as part of these packages that we're looking at, I think there would be utility in it. And I'm not looking to say, yes, we're going to do it or no at this point. I just want to put it on your radar. It's something that to explore and maybe report back to us in the future.
Sure, thank you. We can do that.
All right, thank you. That's the questions I have. So I will turn it back over to Ms. Bjork.
Sorry, I'm still having some challenges here. So if we can move forward, I'm actually going to ask Ms. Brooke to present the next item. I think it is.
Thank you. So we've transitioned from just do it's to our high priority recommendations that came out of the NOVAC report. And there's a handful of those that we'll cover on the next few slides. So the first one here is to assess which land development team staff are included in project review and when. And one of the recommendations was, or what came out of stakeholder interviews and interviews with staff was, it wasn't always consistent when certain development applications were submitted, which divisions and departments of the city would get an opportunity to review that in advance and provide comments. We've had a process like that formalized and in place since the late 90s for projects that require planning commission and then later some staff hearing officer projects. Those are the projects that undergo the DART process review, the Development Application Review Team review. You might have heard of that acronym. That's a very formalized process. We know the staff involved in reviewing those projects. And so, but as we started to see some larger AUD projects and other types of projects that didn't require planning commission review and weren't subject to that otherwise established formal process, might only require ABR, HLC, Architectural Board Review, or Historic Landmarks Commission review. And our staff were doing the best they could to review the plans and determine, Creeks division staff might need to look at this. Transportation planning might need to review this before it goes to the design board. But it was really dependent on the staff's knowledge and level of expertise and really just the time of other staff dedicated to the review, whether or not they could commit to reviewing these design review projects in the same fashion that they review planning commission. Unfortunately, because we didn't have that in place for many years, projects would make their way through the review process, maybe even get approved by the design board and then submit for building permit review. And then at that point, all these divisions and departments are routed these plans and new information was revealed, having not seen the project before. So I'm happy to report that we've mostly implemented this recommendation very formally as of yesterday, but we now have in place criteria for when certain design review projects will be routed to all the different land development team, divisions, and departments. So we have this in place now for all discretionary applications. So that's anything that goes to any of these discretionary bodies listed. And then we have had in place for a while triggers for when building permit projects will be routed to different land development team. We just need to reaffirm that everyone's still on board with the criteria for when those will be routed. So then it's not left to discretion anymore. These are all agreed upon triggers for review, and there's a commitment to review them early on and provide comments to the applicant. So this is great. We're excited about this. It can help hopefully avoid a lot of the late hits that we were experiencing in the past.
Well, let's talk about the goal of creating clear standards and doing application screening, because I have to tell you, this is one I am most excited in the plan check process about this. This is we have no control, right, as a government agency of the quantity of work that comes to us. People submit an application, and we have to take it and evaluate it. But I have wanted to get to a screening process that we used to have here a couple of decades ago when I worked here in the 90s, and we just haven't been able to get there. So I'm hoping this will do it. It's a bigger effort than we initially thought. It used to be pretty simple. Decades ago, we used to have people take the plans that were submitted yesterday and the next morning put them out on the counter, open them up, make sure they were complete, sometimes approve them if they could, and then send them in for more processing, for more reviews, or let the applicant know it's ready to be issued, or let them know they're missing something significant. And we need to get back to that. This is a solid recommendation that'll save us a lot of time in plan check, and it'll help our customers understand, our applicants understand when they come in really early if they're missing some key pieces of information. Not having that interaction over the counter because of the COVID environment does make this more challenging. Trying to do this online it's a different feel, and then expanding it beyond building and safety to all of the land development team makes it a time commitment and kind of a logistic challenge for us on how do we do this given the volume of work that comes in. So we're going to continue to work on this, and I'm super excited about it because I think this can bring a lot of benefit to us, a lot of efficiency, and really help that relationship with the applicant early on, because we're going to have those conversations. Let's have them the next day with the applicant so they can start working on things that they don't have, or they can understand what they might need to be working on, or what they'll get in the way of a correction. So we wanted to be able to say that this was going to be quick, and we just be able to do it. It is a kind of a just do it, but it's going to take some time and coordination, and it is going to likely result in some enhancements or changes to our Acela permit systems to be able to accommodate this. So that's where we're at with this. It didn't get taken on as quickly as we thought it could, but we definitely we're committed to doing this, and we'll complete it within several months. Next slide, please. So this is actually underway. We're testing it this week in a test environment, and we hope to roll it out very soon. I would say within the next 2 to 6 weeks, depending on what bugs we find in it when we start testing it. We are going to experiment with what I call on-demand permits. So things like a like-for-like re-roof, same materials, same color, you're just taking what's there off and putting the same thing back on, roof replacement permit. It's a very high volume permit for us. We do a lot of these each year, and we want to make these on demand. Someone goes on to our Acela online permit system, they make an application, they agree to certain conditions, and when they're done, they pay a fee and they have a permit, and we didn't have to touch it at all. It's simply on demand. When they want one, they can go in and they can acquire one. So I'm super excited if this works and we can get this to be something that is not problematic in the field for us after it's issued. We're going to start looking at all the other routine, very simple permits that we can use. An example of those would be water heater replacements or furnace replacements that are in single family residences or duplexes. These are high, like I say, these are high volume permits that I really envision that we can make these on demand and make that streamlined approval process a no touch for us at the city. And we can trust our applicants when they agree to the conditions that are associated with those permits. Next slide, please. And to Ms. Brooke.
Thank you. So this next high priority recommendation could make one of the biggest differences to the overall land development process. And it is high priority for that reason, but I do want to be upfront in that it's not short term. This will take a long time to fully implement. It will involve changes to the municipal code, but we're committed to starting to identify opportunities where we could reduce or eliminate process steps. And some of those things are, like I mentioned in one of the previous slides, the pre-application review services. Right now it's codified in Title 30, which types of applications must go through a pre-application review. We could look at reducing some of those. We could look at modifying the level of service we provide to some of those applications if we find that they don't need that type of scrutiny. Also, we're committed to looking at different triggers for design review. That's related to another recommendation that NOVAC has. Does the same body of projects need to be going to full board or consent review of the design review boards? Could more of that be done administratively? That would reduce process steps. Also, as you're all aware, as more state legislation is being passed that's really removing discretionary local review for a lot of these development projects in terms of design review, and we're having to move more towards objective standards to review these projects against, we'll likely see that there will be less hearings at design review bodies, and we'll need to reevaluate the relationship between land use approvals that the Planning Commission and staff hearing officer acts on in the design review, the aesthetic aspect of the project that our design review bodies act on. Right now, there's projects that bounce back and forth between the two because that's what the code requires. So as we start to evaluate streamlining our process, this will be an ongoing effort as it has been even in the past, but it is a super high priority. Just want you to be aware that we are looking into it, and hopefully I can report back more in more detail on this one at future subcommittee meetings. And I'm up for this one too. So another high priority recommendation, through stakeholder interviews and discussions with staff, NOVAC identified a need to have more support to the design review boards in particular. So as you're probably aware, we prepare written staff reports for council, for the Planning Commission, for the staff hearing officer. We'll prepare staff memos to the design review boards if there's a particularly unique issue that we feel they need some advanced staff input on, or findings that they don't deal with every week. We'll do that. But we found, and our design review board members have also requested at times for written staff reports for design review board agendas. And so we're committed to doing that. I just need a little bit more time to implement that. We've had several vacancies in the planning division for a long time, and we are slowly but surely getting those filled. And so once I have those filled and have the staff assigned to the appropriate design bodies, then I want to talk about what these staff reports look like and how we can prepare those in advance for the board members and for the public, so that when the design board members are sitting down and reviewing a project, they've been able to take into account the issues that staff has identified for them to focus on, and they know clearly the findings against which they'll be reviewing the project. And so we think that extra support can help everybody involved in the design review process.
Hang on, I'm having a little trouble getting my buttons to work here. There we go. So the next one is one that very happily, as you all know from yesterday's meeting, is complete. As part of the presentation of the proposed revisions to the stormwater permit at yesterday's council meeting, Mr. Benson did answer a number of questions regarding the equivalency of our requirements to neighboring communities. So I think that not only this committee, but also the full council has received this information at this time. Next slide, please. So the final thing we want to go through is some other process improvements underway, and these are things that will continue to be worked on, and I just don't want to lose sight of the fact that we are continuing to work on them. We are continuing to update our website and communication tools on an ongoing basis to try and improve that, and developing tools to educate customers about the land development team process. We will work on that. We do try and provide that information, but we will also be needing to make modifications and then update again our information about how the process works. We are continuing to implement Acela, and we are currently advertising for an administrator to help us with improving the functionality and the management of that system. And it's been critical to have it during this COVID time because it has allowed us to go to this online processing. So it's a very great tool, but it still needs quite a lot of work. The preliminary deadline for submitting for the Acela position was the 15th of September. We had one application at that point, so that application period has been extended. We are hoping that we'll get some really great applicants and we can get moving on that and continue to get Acela to be fully functional. And then defining a starting point for the discretionary review process is something that we are still also working on. Next slide, please. So one other fairly major issue that I wanted to bring to this committee's attention and get some preliminary feedback on it was to allow the narrowing of the review of projects as they come in for permitting and application review. Right now, we have a code section that requires that we evaluate the entire property and have any existing zoning violations corrected. We can. That is something that we have put on ourselves. We could eliminate this requirement. It would not prevent us from requiring the correction of zoning violations. We might then choose to do it as either, especially if it's a life safety issue, obviously, we're never going to miss a life safety issue, miss asking for correction of a life safety issue. But, for example, sometimes somebody will come in for a back fence permit and maybe their hedge is the wrong height and then they get a correction for the hedge. So we could narrow that focus, and I'm looking for some direction as to whether this committee would like us to come back and discuss this further at the next meeting or go to council and get the direction from council to take this to planning commission. I will tell you that I am leaning towards coming back to you. It's there because there was a belief and a need that we needed this. I do think that we certainly do not want to eliminate our ability to do a complete zoning review and require corrections. The question is, do we want to limit our obligation to do that? And so I would like your direction on this, but I think if my recommendation to the committee is that you ask us to come back and have a further discussion about this, but I did want to give you the option to just move it along if you wanted us to. So with that, concludes our staff presentation. If there are additional questions.
Before we go just procedural questions now, I do need to open it up for public comment. So before we get into giving direction on that last item, I'll open the floor to questions, then we'll do public comment and then come back and have a deliberation. So Councilmember Gutierrez, you have the floor.
I was just going to say that I would like to have more discussion on the zoning for next meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. Councilmember Jordan, you had your camera on. Do you have any questions at this point? Seeing none, I will, questions or hold
No,
your comments for now. We're going to open up.
I'm following your admonishment.
So we will open it up to public comment. Mrs. Kokinda, is there any public comments to this item?
Thank you, Chair Friedman. Again, if you are joining us by webinar and wish to speak on this agenda item, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. Please note you only have to click the hand icon one time, and a raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down as shown in the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. And at this time, I do not see anybody who has raised their hand. Chair Friedman, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will close public comment and now turn it back to my fellow council members for any comments or direction. Specifically, what we'll be looking for is direction on recommendation number 18 on whether to have staff research what that would be and come back to us, or whether we don't want them. So thoughts on where to go with that. We have heard from Councilmember Gutierrez, who would like to see them research and come back to us with more information. Councilmember Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On that zoning scope question, definitely I would like to hear more and chat more about that, and kind of my just my overall interest area in that is finding a balance to reduce zoning scope actions to a level that really just focus on whatever the proper phrase is, like human health and safety from a city's perspective, rather than you know, a stairway was put in and we didn't know about it, or a boat's parked in the setback or something like that. Right now, my belief is generally you go on to look at one thing and you basically walk the whole property. And I think personally, my opinion is that some of those things are just neighbor to neighbor and neighborhood things. If I can live with the neighbor with something in their setback or something parked in their driveway, I've already done that and negotiated that with myself, or I would have complained about it. And I just don't think a zoning, an inspection that involves the scope of something else should begin to pick up on that if it's not a health and safety issue as we define or recognize that in the code. And then the other thing I wanted to mention too is back to something that Ms. Brooke presented on the eliminating process steps. I am, and I understand it's a big bite and a long process, but I'm in also big favor of that where it can be done. And I think one of the burdens there that's on staff is not to just end up with, here's what we're cutting and a short version of why, and then somehow we're going to have to support that and go all the way up to council. But to make sure that we have clear talking points and clear kind of substantiation of how we got to that recommendation, why it's the best recommendation, and we can chat that. And then if the committee agrees with that, that we can chat that up intelligently, whether it's inside or outside City Hall. So that would be my hope for those. That's all I have to offer on that last section.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. Councilmember Gutierrez, do you have any comments before I make mine? We did hear from you on the others. Is there anything else you'd like to add? If not,
I'm good at this point. Thank you.
thank you. So I will just be brief. I concur with my colleagues on the direction on looking at the municipal code and the scope of a project, getting more information and coming back to us with that. Some of the things I would like to look at are differences between private residential and public areas. I know we need to be very cognizant of Americans with Disabilities Act and other issues. So how we would understand those as we look at these, the example that Ms. Bjork gave about the fence and then the hedge is different than something where you're going in and there's ADA issues that might be observed. So I do want to understand those as part of that discussion. I'm also just really pleased that a lot of these recommendations are going forward. And as we can see, all these tie into the beginning of the discussion on the mission and the vision. And one of them that I really was interested in was it was number 16, I believe, where it was just the same day where you go in and you get the permit online for like such as the roof. So I will be interested to hear a future report on how that is working and how it was implemented. So with that, I think staff, you do have the direction to come back to us and get more information on the request for, it was recommendation number 18, I believe. And with that, I don't believe, is there anything else you need at this moment, Ms. Bjork?
No, I think that's very clear, and thank you for the direction.
Okay, great. So I will close this item, and the next item is our next meeting. And we gave direction as part of the previous one on items for the next meeting, so you have that. And do you have the date of our next meeting, Ms. Bjork, Ms. Kokinda, for the public to know? If not, we can send out. I don't have it right in front of me. Apologize.
I don't have it offhand, and so we can, but I do want to remind the public that we do have a website for this subcommittee that where all of the meeting agenda minutes are posted, and meeting agendas and minutes are posted. And you also have an option to go if you're interested in receiving notices about this meeting and this committee. You can sign up and you will be on our mailing list. And I think Ms. Brooke has the information on the next meeting for us.
Yes, thank you. Our next scheduled meeting for this committee is October 28th, a Wednesday as well.
Great. So that information's out there. We will meet a month from now on the 28th. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.